This week on Vaticano, we reflect on Pope Benedict XVI's transformative legacy and sit down with his personal secretary, Archbishop Monsignor Gänswein, for an in-depth conversation on the former pontiff's enduring impact. Also, learn about the Truth and Beauty Project, a unique Catholic experience that immerses young professionals in the heart of Rome. For this and more, Vaticano starts now. The Vatican has published the guiding document for the final part of the Synod on Synodality. The Instrumentum Laboris, or working document, aims at answering the question, how to be a synodal church on mission. It originates from reports from 108 bishops' conferences, 9 Eastern Catholic churches, as well as parish priests and other international ecclesial groups across the globe.
All these reports show a living church. They show movements of the Spirit and a church on move.
While the guiding document for the first session of the Synod last year covered controversial topics such as women's admission to the diaconate, priestly celibacy, and LGBTQ outreach, the new document focuses on other issues. It offers many concrete proposals, including the institution of a listening and accompaniment ministry, greater lay involvement in parish life, and more powerful parish councils. The document also gives ample space to reflection on the role of women in the Church.
The
contributions gathered from all phases of the synodal process highlighted the need to give fuller recognition to the charisms, vocation, and role of women in all areas of the life of the Church.
The document calls for a wider participation of women in all stages of decision-making processes, along with wider access to positions of responsibility in dioceses. The working document also emphasizes the demand for transparency and accountability in and by the Church, which has come about because of financial scandals and abuses of minors and vulnerable persons in the Church. This is of utmost importance, since the lack of transparency and accountability fuels clericalism.
Transparency and accountability are crucial, not just in matters of sexual and financial abuse, but in all areas, including pastoral planning and methods of evangelization. It also involves how the Church respects human dignity, such as the working conditions within its institutions, which is an important issue.
The newly released document will be the subject of prayer, conversation, and discernment by participants in the second session of the Synod of Bishops, to be held throughout the month of October in Rome. Its purpose is to offer guidance to the Pope. It can be expected that the October Assembly will also produce a final document that will be handed over to the Holy Father for a possible apostolic exhortation. During an election rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump raised his fist in defiance, blood pouring down his face, following an assassination attempt. I knew something was wrong immediately. I heard a whizzing sound, shots, and felt the bullet rip through my skin. There was a lot of bleeding. Trump later posted on his social media site, the suspected attacker was promptly shot and killed by Secret Service agents. 1 spectator died, and 2 others were wounded in the incident. Trump was rushed to a local hospital with a bullet wound to his right ear before being flown to New Jersey. Father Jason Charin, a Ukrainian Catholic pastor who gave a benediction during Trump's rally, had urged the crowd to pray for Trump moments before the former president was shot and wounded.
Yes, it's the first time I'd been to a Trump rally and first time they'd asked me to lead it in prayer. Well, I remember a kind of a jubilant atmosphere, a large gathering of people, and as soon as they called for the moment of prayer and I came up to the podium, people were very, very respectful all of a sudden. But my prayer was directed to God our Father, that He would give us His Holy Spirit, that we may perceive in the present crises of our time, in our world and in our nation, that we might perceive through this crisis the need to make right our relationships with one another, with our families, but ultimately our relationship with God.
In a statement issued late Sunday morning, the Holy See expressed concern about last night's episode of violence, which wounds people and democracy, causing suffering and death. The statement added that the Holy See is united in prayer with the U.S. bishops for America, for the victims and for peace in the country, hoping that the motives of the violent may never prevail.
Hello and welcome to this week's Vaticano Updates, the most important news from the Holy Father and the Vatican. The Holy See condemned the July the 13th shooting at a Pennsylvania campaign rally that injured former U.S. President Donald Trump, others, and left one person dead. Vatican spokesperson Matteo Bruni stated on July the 14th that the Holy See is concerned about last night's violence, which wounds people and democracy, causing suffering and death. The statement added that the Holy See joins the U.S. bishops in praying for America, the victims, and peace, hoping that violence will not prevail. Pope Francis did not comment on this incident during his Sunday Angelus. In a rare July audience, Pope Francis called on religious from various orders to pray for vocations that will carry their charisms into the future. Pope Francis met with members of 6 religious congregations who are in Rome for their general or provincial chapters. Pope Francis wrote the preface for Women and Ministries in the Synodal Church by 3 theologians and 2 cardinals from the C9 Council's February meeting. He addresses clericalism, noting it affects both ordained ministries and lay people, including women. Cardinal Mario Grech announced that Pope Francis has asked the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith to study women's role in the Church, including the possibility of women deacons, and to publish a document on the subject. Over 50,000 people will gather in Indianapolis for the National Eucharistic Congress, marking the end of the U.S. Catholic Church's 3-year revival to inspire belief in Jesus in the Eucharist. Held at Lucas Oil Stadium at the Indiana Convention Center, this is the first such Congress since World War II. Launched in 2022, the revival aims to renew the Church by fostering a living relationship with Jesus in the Eucharist. Pope Francis designates Cardinal Secretary of State Pietro Parolin as his representative for the concluding celebrations of the pilgrimage of Latin Rite Ukrainian Catholics, scheduled for Sunday, July the 21st, at the Marian Shrine of Berdichev. Thank you so much for watching this week's Vaticano Updates. Paola Riaza for EWTN Vaticano.
In a few moments, we'll be back with a reflection on the legacy of Pope Benedict XVI on Vaticano.
Archbishop Georg Gänswein, why was it so important for you to come here to Altötting to the Benedict Forum?
Your question surprises me.
It was no surprise that Archbishop Georg Gänswein was happy to come to Germany to participate in the second Benedict XVI Forum.
For me, it is a conscientious obligation to pass on what I experienced with him, what he left behind in terms of heritage and treasures, because this is a great gift for Catholics, for the Church, for the people.
A year and a half has passed since the death of Pope Benedict XVI. From July the 10th until July the 14th, theologians met in the Bavarian town of Altötting, where Germany's most important Marian shrine is located, not far from Joseph Ratzinger's birthplace.
The reason for the conference, which we are having here at Altötting, is to remember the great heritage of Pope Benedict XVI. He wrote the bestseller called Introduction to Christianity, and we've modified the title a little bit, calling it Guidance Towards Christianity. People need guidance nowadays, and that's what we try to offer based on the writings of Joseph Ratzinger, Pope Benedict XVI.
The conference was organized by the association Fundatio Christiana Virtus in cooperation with the Diocese of Passau. Speakers included Cardinal Kurt Koch, prefect of the Dicastery for Promoting Christian Unity, who spoke about the significance of Pope Benedict XVI's theological work.
I miss him very well because he was a very, very kind person. He was a person with a very deep faith, and he was a very intelligent theologian. And these three characteristics in one person is characteristic for Pope Benedict.
He always prayed, celebrated Mass every day, prayed the breviary, and so we wanted to reflect that also during the Congress, that there are times of prayer and times of discussion and times of conferences.
At the Benedict XVI Forum, not only the theological legacy of Pope Benedict was discussed, but also his human side.
Im Sommersemester 65.
I started studying theology in Münster in the summer semester of 1965 and 1966, and that's when I got to know him. I was very impressed by him. I noticed that he never hissed for applause. He was a man who arrived very simply on a bicycle and had an old briefcase. You could really tell that it was important to him to open up the faith to us.
Es sei mein Anliegen, uns also den Glauben zu erschließen.
Sister Christine Felder supported the then Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger in his household in Rome since 1988.
Ja, das war wirklich seine Einstellung. Vielleicht eine kleine Anekdote. Ich war bei ihm, als 10
I was with him when he was prefect for the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith for 10 years. I thought to myself, this anniversary has to be highlighted somehow. It's something special. I prepared a little dessert with a number 10 on it. He really liked sweet desserts, but on this day he came home, saw the dessert with the number 10 on it, and then he said, "Sister Christine, that's no reason to celebrate." That really got to me, because he had really longed to be able to spend more time with his books and theology without all the external pressures.
Belastungen auch widmen zu können.
Please take us back to that night when the white smoke came and Pope Benedict was elected. Were you in St. Peter's Square then?
Nein, ich hatte es geahnt.
No, but I had suspected it. My whole community was sitting in front of the TV. They came from Vespers and saw that the bells of St. Peter were starting to ring. I thought I wouldn't be able to make it to St. Peter's Square. I was the only one who stayed at home and sat in front of the TV. You won't believe it. The cardinals come out, the announcement follows. Cardinal Protodeacon Jorge Arturo Medina begins and says the name Josephum. And at that moment, we had a power failure in our house, and I didn't hear the surname.
Um den Radio aufzudrehen, bis ich das organisiert hatte ich schon einen Anruf von einer alten Dame in Vorarlberg.
Then I ran to find a radio. By the time I finally found a radio, I had already received a call from an old lady from Austria. And then it was clear to me that it was Joseph Ratzinger.
Und dann war es mir klar, es ist Joseph Ratzinger.
Nachdem Papst Benedikt zurückgetreten ist.
After Pope Benedict resigned, did he change? He had previously said that he was tired, that he no longer had any strength. Was he bitter and disappointed?
Nein, also verbittert.
No, he wasn't resentful or disappointed in any way. I never saw him like that. Basically, he was a person whom I experienced in all phases of his life, from 1988 to the end, with great peace and contentment, or perhaps I should say, with great trust in God. His resignation as a pope was a decision that he made before God, and I believe that he always remained at peace before God.
The organizers and also the participants of the Benedict XVI Forum are convinced that Benedict XVI still has a lot to say today.
Oh, there are several of his works that remain. They are surely reread in the next years to come. And there is his great testimony, his life, as he was a person who believed deeply in God, and who tried to do the will of God in all the different circumstances that he did not look for, but that were given to him.
I think his legacy is a deep theology that shows us that reason and faith are not opposed to each other, and that our intellect, our brain, our head, our heart, our soul, that they all belong together, and that we should search for the Lord and that we search for Jesus in all of this.
Even though Benedict XVI spent the last years of his life in seclusion as Pope Emeritus, people have not forgotten him. Archbishop Georg Gänswein was Pope Benedict XVI's private secretary for 19 years. Hardly anyone came as close to the Pope from Germany as he did. At the Benedict XVI Forum in Altötting, Bavaria, Gänswein spoke with Andreas Thonhauser, the Vatican bureau chief of EWTN.
Herr Erzbischof, Sie brauchen eigentlich gar keine Einleitung.
Archbishop Gänswein, you don't really need an introduction because you are well known. You have been at the side of the German Pope for a long time, but above all, you have stood by him. In these almost 20 years that you have supported Pope Benedict XVI, what were the key moments for you?
Welches waren die Schlüsselmomente für Sie?
Die Schlüsselmomente sind.
When I think back to 2003, the key moments are when he asked me if I would be willing to be his secretary for a certain period of time, because he would be released by St. John Paul II as prefect emeritus anyway. I think that was perhaps the greatest deception of his life. So Ratzinger, he did not retire, but John Paul II died 2 years later. And then, of course, the first time I was allowed to see the successor of John Paul II in the Sistine Chapel, he was no longer Cardinal Ratzinger. He was Pope Benedict now. And now I'm taking a leap into December of 2022. I think a lot about the last days of Pope Benedict, almost every day. These are moments or memories that come, that fill me up, and of course, a lot has happened in between.
After all, he was a man of faith. Can you tell us more about how he lived his faith?
Es ist ganz einfach. Also hat so geschrieben.
It is quite simple. He wrote, preached, and spoke in the same way as he lived his faith. Simple, clear, convincing. He was not only a great man of words or the pencil, but also a faithful son of the Church in the way he lived his spiritual life. The simple example: Holy Mass, Rosary, Breviary, adoration, Thanksgiving after Mass, spiritual reading. Nothing out of the ordinary at all. That's the continuity, regardless of whether it's snowing outside or going haywire inside. It is simply this continuity that has shaped him and the others. That's also how he created the atmosphere.
Atmosphärisch gewirkt.
Als Österreicher bin ich ja auch.
As an Austrian, I am also familiar with the prejudices against our German neighbors. Some mean people like to use military analogies to describe Pope Benedict, but you say, no, he wasn't harsh at all, but very gentle.
Nicht hart, sondern sanft im Umgang.
Wer Papst Benedikt?
Anyone who has known Pope Benedict, even a little, must say, the image that has been painted of the Panzer Cardinal or the Rottweiler of God is one of the worst distortion and has, as they say in journalism, become a narrative that has unfortunately left its mark. Just looking into his eyes was enough to see that there is so much leniency there. Today these images have a greater impact than words, and these images lasted until the end of his life.
Einfach das bis zum Schluss des Lebens angehalten.
Wie haben Sie ihn in den letzten...
How did you experience him in the last years, in the last weeks of his life? Was he afraid of death?
Hatte Angst vor dem Tod?
Angst vor dem Tod habe ich nie festgestellt.
I have never noticed any fear of death. Perhaps worry, but he was actually cheerful to the end, in his soul, in his heart. The most difficult thing for him was that he had to accept that he was almost no longer able to speak intelligibly at the end, and that his language had failed him. He once said very casually, "I believe that the good Lord has taken away my language because I have spoken too much in my life, and now I have to learn to be silent."
Zu viel gesprochen hat und jetzt das Schweigen lernen muss.
Even though Pope Benedict XVI fell silent forever on December the 31st, 2022, and returned home to his father, not only former companions such as Archbishop Gänswein will continue to cherish the memory of the German Pope. We'll be back after a short break to explore Rome's central role in evangelization through truth and beauty.
Coming to Rome without a Catholic perspective means that you're missing out on the true meaning of Rome. I think we have the heart of Europe, basically the heart of Christian Europe we will see here. So if you come with an open heart and open mind for that Christian history or that Christian culture, then I think only then you can experience Rome to its fullest extent.
Rome holds a central place in illuminating the Catholic principles of truth and beauty. Serving as a historical and spiritual epicenter for the faith, the city guides all who visit towards the ultimate truth and beauty, as best expressed by the psalmist in Psalm 27, verse 4. "All I ask, and this I seek, is to dwell in the house of the Lord, and to gaze at His beauty forever and ever." Pilgrim groups, tourists, and students flock to the Eternal City year-round to visit its historic churches and monuments, experiencing the incredible beauty of Rome. With over 900 churches, the city's beauty and structure are inseparable from the faith that lies at its very heart. One such group of pilgrims visiting Rome are the participants in the Truth and Beauty Project, a group of young Catholic professionals participating in a week-long immersion in the city. The Truth and Beauty Project was founded by John and Ashley Nerona 7 years ago.
Well, the idea behind the Truth and Beauty Project was that we realized that there wasn't this comprehensive program where one could truly understand their Christian identity from all different aspects of really bringing the different fields of knowledge together. Not only knowledge, but also practical living, how to live it out in a world that is presenting happiness and beauty in a very different light from what the true Christian story is all about.
And I would call the Truth and Beauty Project a school of Christian living, because it's an experience, a week-long experience in Rome that really speaks to answer the questions that I think resonate in all of our human hearts. Why am I here? What is the meaning of life? What is God calling me to?
The city's rich tapestry of ancient architecture, art, and cultural heritage reveals the church's historical legacy.
If you're walking through Rome, you're seeing like a continuity between the ancient times, the pre-Christian times, and then you walk a few streets ahead, and then you see also places where there were pagan temples or pagan parts of the city, like the Pantheon, that are then being Christianized and now are beautiful churches.
The grandeur of St. Peter's Basilica, with its dome designed by Michelangelo, stands as a testament to the pursuit of truth through beauty. Every detail, from the intricately designed mosaics to the statues that adorn the basilica, reflect a deep theological message, embodying the belief that beauty is a pathway to experiencing the divine and understanding deep truths about God's creation. And these buildings offer the sanctuary and peace of silence to contemplate the divine, something that seems rarer and rarer these days in major cities.
But being able to step away and go into these spaces that are much older than you and much grander than you help you remember that you are a part of a bigger story and something much grander than your own individual life.
Through art, the Church has communicated complex theological concepts in an accessible and profoundly moving manner. This aligns with the Catholic understanding that beauty can lead the human soul towards truth, as art transcends words and evokes a direct emotional and spiritual response.
If we are made in the image of likeness, what does that mean? And what does Rome do to tell us about that, to invite us into that story? So understanding what then does that identity mean to us, and how do we live that as Christians? And each Rome experience is filled with the opportunity to go back into time, go back into history, to be a part of that continuity of 1900 years of pilgrims.
Pilgrims from around the world flock to the Eternal City, drawn by the desire to connect with the roots of their faith and to witness firsthand the sublime beauty that has been cultivated over centuries. Rome stands as a beacon of the Catholic conviction that beauty is not merely aesthetic, but is integrally linked to the pursuit of truth, offering a profound encounter with the divine through the splendor of its sacred spaces.